الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهد الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن سيدنا ومولانا محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل إن كنتم تحبون الله فاتبعوني يحببكم الله ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم والله غفور رحيم قل أطيعوا الله والرسول فإن تولوا فإن الله لا يحب الكافرين وقال تعالى ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما وقال تعالى وأطيعوا الله وأطيعوا الرسول فإن توليتم فإنما على رسولنا البلاغ المبين وقال تعالى لقد كان لكم في رسول الله أسوة حسنة لمن كان يرجو الله واليوم الآخر وذكر الله كثيرا وقال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم كل أمتي يدخلون الجنة إلا من أبى قيل ومن يأبى يا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال من أطاعني دخل الجنة ومن عصاني فقد أبى أو كما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام صدق الله العظيم وصدق رسوله النبي الكريم. My dear respected brothers, elders, listeners, Alhamdulillah, all praise to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Almighty, the most merciful, the most kind, the most generous, the most forgiving, the most loving. He has blessed us and given us these 12 Islamic months in the year. Currently, we are in the 3rd Islamic month, which is known as Rabiul Awwal. This month is special for the Muslims. This is a month in which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was born. Imam al-Anbiya, the leader of all, the Imam of all the Anbiyas, the final messenger, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was born. And it is the same month in which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had passed away. As Muslims, what steps, what things should we do in this month, and some of the things that are happening in this month, the month of Rabiul Awwal, should we do them or we should not? And what are the guidance and the teaching of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Are all related to the verses of the Quran that I have recited. There is no doubt that the greatest event in history was the birth of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The final messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was born, and humanity was blessed. There's no other bigger, better blessing than this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent the Quran. The Quran is a book of guidance. The Quran is a book that gives us laws that we have to follow and things that we need to stay away from. If Allah willed, He could have sent the Quran and said that you follow the Quran. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, along with books, Allah sent messengers. Because Allah has put it as part of human nature Just studying the book is not enough, but we need a role model. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam as our role model. So if we follow Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, we will be successful. And if we leave the sunnahs and the practices and the teachings of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, then we will be humiliated and we will be disgraced. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us this instruction in the Quran, that we must obey, we must follow. And if we do not follow, then what are the circumstances? What can happen? And as Muslims, not only from the tongue, but it must be something which is in our heart and our actions. That we love Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam and we will obey Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Showing respect is just not enough. Or just saying that I love Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam is not enough. Our actions also must be with what we are saying. Even the non-Muslims in our time, apart from the few that you may get, they all show respect to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. They all have no choice but to say the most followed and the best character was on the face of humanity was Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. They have no choice to praise Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So just uttering the words of love and there's no action will not be enough. We have to have both. We love Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and we will give this message that we must love Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and along with that, our actions that we follow Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam in his teachings. To carry on with my points that I'm mentioning, we have to understand these 2 points first. And then it will be easy to understand the next steps or the next points that I'd like to mention in my speech. So the greatest event on the face of this earth, the birth of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Now, if there was a concept in Islam of celebrating birthdays, then the most deserving celebration would have been the birth of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Now the question is there a concept in Islam of celebrating birthdays? Simple and plain answer is no, there is no concept of celebrating birthdays. Now you may say that we have heard some people saying that celebrating birthdays is allowed, is fine. It's not a practice of the Muslims. But to celebrate birthdays is not a concept in Islam. It's something which the non-Muslims do. And if we look, Isa alayhi salam, those that attribute themselves, or they say they follow Jesus, Isa alayhi salam, after he was taken to the heavens, his followers, up until 300 years, there was no concept of celebrating birthdays. After that, this concept began where people had mentioned that we will remember the birth of Jesus, Isa alayhi salam, by just speaking about his good qualities and his teachings. So people will gather together and listen to his teachings. And then they began to think that this is very dull, it's not attracting people, so we need to add things on. Then music and poetry and so on was added into this, adding until we have reached now that on the name of the birth of Isa alayhi salam, Jesus, people that are drinking day and night. Some, not all, may drink alcohol more than they do on other days. And all this is in the name of the birth or celebration of Isa alayhi salam. So there's no concept of this celebration or celebrating birthdays in Islam. If there was, then the most deserving was the birth of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now we look into Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. After receiving revelation, 23 years of his life, when we look into his seerah, we do not find a single year where this was celebrated, or any teachings in which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said that celebrate my birthday. Number two, we look into the life of the blessed companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Before we start to issue fatwas, verdicts, and say to people that you are showing disrespect to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we should try and understand that what is the evidence and concept. So one evidence I presented in the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, 23 years, there's not even a single year where he had celebrated or he had told the companions. Number two, the companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam loved him and followed him to the extreme in every step of their life. To the extent, one example that I will give you, easier to understand how they obeyed Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and followed his sunnah. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was delivering a talk on one occasion, and there were people that were standing out. Just like we have now, if there's a talk, some people maybe stand at the back. So it's part of the etiquette. Either you leave or either join the gathering. Those that are sitting here, I hope, if there is any talk that is taking place in the masjid, you either decide and do one thing or the other. Not half in and half out. Either come and join the gathering. If you need to go, then leave the masjid. It is more easier for the speaker that is speaking, and it doesn't create an atmosphere of disturbance for the others. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu an was walking on the street coming towards this gathering. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was given the order, sit down. This command was for the ones that are standing at the end. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anh, immediately at that point while he was walking, he sat down. After the talk was finished, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had asked Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anh, that why did you sit down? This was for those that are standing at the edges. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anh reply was, when my ears had heard the command of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud could not take one step forward. Yet he knew also that this was for them, but he said, I did not have the courage or dare to take one step forward when the command of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has reached my ears. This is a level of love and obedience the Sahaba had of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If such an event that they could miss in their lives, more than 124,000 companions, could they have missed this such big event in the life of every year? We have no example in the life of the Sahabas. Now, this is something which come after with the praises of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the seerah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which there's no doubt that can be done. There's nothing wrong with this. And then further it continued and continued, and as year goes on, there are new editions. The ulamas mention a sign of innovation is when there's new things that are introduced in it. A sunnah is something which will remain everywhere the same. But a sign of innovation is that things will be introduced into it. Now what is happening, these rallies, these decorations, illuminations, and all kind of things, flags that are being raised in the name and love of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And if anyone does not participate in this, then they are declared as those that are disrespectful to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Logically, every Muslim must think, how can one be a Muslim and even consider and a slightest thought come into another Muslim's mind that him being a Muslim and deliberately would disrespect Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and be still a Muslim? Without understanding, I did not to take this step, but to say those that do not participate in this, they are disrespectful, and saying such harsh words. Like there's this one saying in Urdu that I came across, where such words have been saying, Hubbe Ahmad ki tabligh naki, guzar di Umar gustakhiyon mein. That person, that these people, they do not propagate the love of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They've spent their entire life in disrespecting Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. How is it that a person who is a Muslim and deliberately show disrespect to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, how is this possible? So there's some reason why they did not choose to do this, and the evidences that I've presented to you is enough that why we do not we avoid and do not take in these rallies or with flags or blocking streets or decoration and decorating. All these things, as they should be avoided. And as I mentioned, things that are added and increased into this is a sign of innovation. If there is poetry or the seerah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned, then that is fine. There's nothing wrong. That is part of our daily life. And another point I would like to mention is Islam is not based on customs and fixed days. When we start to fix days, then what happens? Then we will only do worship on them days, and the rest of the days we are free. For example, there's Mother's Day and there's Father's Day. So what does this concept put into one's mind, that when it comes to Mother's Day, I'll bring some flowers for my mother and some chocolates and maybe give her a massage on that day, and then after that I'll say, okay, see you next year on Mother's Day. For the rest of the year, there's no service, there's no khidmah, and the same with Father's Day. But Islam does not teach us that is fixed days. Islam says that you do this all the time and it's part of your life. We love Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam every day. We will follow Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam every day. We will spread the message of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam every day. It's part of our life. When we start to restrict things to days, when someone has passed away, then certain gatherings on the 3rd day, on the 40th day, and 1 year, then they get together, then they read Quran. What about the rest of the days? When we are restricting days, then what will happen? We will only do those worship on them days. Then the rest, we will not. Time does not allow me to go any further. Just one announcement that I would like to make, an important announcement. Many of you may have received the messages also. As we know from the news, that there was an earthquake which took place in Morocco. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help and protect the victims. Now, there will be a collection in our masjid after the Jummah prayer. I will humbly request you, please donate as much as you can in this great cause. And also, there will be a collection for the floods that took place in Libya after the Jummah prayer. So please donate to this generously. Jazakallah.